before. Get a little closer. I feel like you're so far away. We've done this before, and it's been really a blessing to us and a blessing to each other. But we want to talk a little bit. The theme today is lessons from a father. And Joe and I both have, Joe, obviously, as you know, lost his dad 2 weeks ago. I lost my dad. It's just 3 months now. So it's kind of odd for us to be celebrating Father's Day without our dads. But we thought it would be really neat and honoring to our pops to be able to share some lessons of life that they've shared with us, and just do it kind of in a conversation. So the first verse I want to give you, and we'll kind of kick back and forth here, is Proverbs chapter 4, verse 1 to 5. I'll read it for you. It says, "Hear, O sons," and I'm going to stick daughters in there as well. You're not out of this. "Hear, O sons, of father's instruction, and be attentive, that you may gain insight. For I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words. Keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget, and do not turn away from the words of my mouth." Listen, fathers are ordained by God, whether you're a son or a daughter, to be put in a place that they have wisdom and instruction that we can understand life a little better. And there's a lot of things that Pastor Joe used to say this all the time, more things are caught than taught. There's a lot of things that you can learn and glean just by watching a father and watching his life. Joe's dad served the Lord for over 40 years and was a full-time pastor. My dad was much different than that. My dad owned a small business in Manhattan, and I have to tell you, the first 3/4 of his life, mine and his relationship was strained because of the man that he was. He was not a man who knew God. We'll just leave it there. Some of you have heard the testimony. We have two different fathers, very different. But I'm sharing this with you, and we're going to talk about it today because oftentimes Christians, believers, because maybe our dad is not saved and he doesn't know the Lord, often we discount and disqualify his words. We discount and disqualify the impartation that he has to give us because somehow in our minds we give ourselves an exemption. Is anybody with me today? You understand that? And sometimes there's been difficult roads. There's been hurts, pains, offenses. And because of those things, a lot of us have quit early on the relationship. And a lot of us have also not benefited from the value of having that divinely ordered covering over our lives, whether they knew God or didn't know God. You know, again, the beginning of this is talking about listening, son, listening, daughter, to the instructions so that you can gain knowledge, so that you can gain wisdom. There's so many areas of life, and I counsel people all the time, as does Joe. We counsel people all the time that if they just, I always say this to them, if they just had a father in their lives, if they just had a father in their lives, some of these normal, natural responses in relationship, normal, natural responses in business, normal, natural responses in how they respond to authority would be so much better, and it would benefit their lives. But we cut it short very often because I don't know what happens. I mean, we were so tough when we weren't saved, and then we get saved and our skin gets so thin that everything hurts us and offends us. And I understand that because we get sensitive to God. But we've got to be strong in the Lord and the power of his might, because if you quit too early on everything that needs to be downloaded into your life, you probably are not going to be as well-rounded as you need to be. And you may even miss out on a lot of blessing and a lot of insights that will help you in life. Does that make sense? I wrote down, be careful not to disconnect, discount, and remove yourselves from God's planned order of a father in your life, whether they knew the Lord and were pastors or came to the Lord towards the end of their life. The lessons of a father prepare us for successful and fruitful life. The theme of this is all looking at the humanity of a man, and I'm sure Joe will talk about that too. Just because Dad was a pastor all these years and knew Jesus 40 years, there's also humanity there, right? There's not perfection. And we have to be able to look past the failures, the times, my kids, when I'm grumpy. Got to look past the times when we're not feeling it, to understand it has nothing to do with feelings. It has all to do with staying connected. So the flow of the information and the wisdom needs to be imparted so that we are whole, sound, complete individuals. And if you hang on tight, maybe, just maybe, can't guarantee this, but there'll be a healing in relationship as well if you stay with it long enough. So I'm throwing it to Joe.
Yeah, well, let me just say before we get into our dialogue, whatever that is going to be, I think perspective is really important in life, but specifically for what this church is going through right now. And how fitting to sing a song in worship today where the line is, "Oh, death, where is your sting?" Right. And I think perspective is extremely, extremely important because you can feel an atmosphere of people mourning. And we understand that because Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse number 4, his second beatitude, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they would be comforted." So we understand that there's a process of mourning and grieving. Jesus said, "You're blessed if you mourn." Actually, the Greek word for comfort there, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's what you would think it means, comfort, to be consoled. But the first definition before, you know how in the Greek there's several different definitions? The first one, before all the other definitions of what you think the word comfort really means to be called or summoned. That's what the word comfort means there in the Greek. Blessed are those who mourn, because you're going to be called by God after that. You're going to be summoned by God. And I'm trying to be very careful in my life to mourn, yes, to grieve, to do what I have to do. My family seems to think I'm not doing that enough. Maybe I'm not, but I'm trying to get there as best I can. But I understand a different perspective too. I'm being, as a son, you as spiritual children, spiritual sons, Lord, we're being also summoned to do something in this season of mourning, in this time of mourning. So I think perspective is really important. Oh, death, where is your sting? Satan, it wasn't Satan 1, us 0. The devil got 1. Oh, he got us. No, I don't see it like that. Amen. I believe that on February 23rd, 1978, my dad dealt a serious blow to the devil. And I believe over the last 40 years, he's dealt a series of blows. And I believe he dealt a knockout blow to Satan on June 1st, 2019. Not the other way around. So death didn't, maybe physically, carnally, fleshly, yeah, maybe death took his body. But the moment he stepped into the arms of his Savior, his Mashiach, he overcame death. And his legacy lives through all of us. So I just want to say that before we get into the Father's Day deal today, just be aware of that perspective. Be aware that, yes, this weeping endures for a season, but joy comes in the morning, amen? Blessed are those who mourn, but we're being called, we're being summoned to do something here. And I'm excited for the future. I'm very excited, and I would rather be on this Father's Day. Me and my sisters were texting a little bit this morning. None of us thought this is the way Father's Day would be for this year. None of us in our wildest dreams could have thought that. And, we texted a few nice things back and forth to each other. And then I sent some Marlon Brando GIFs, family GIFs. And God is comforting, amen. But there's no place I'd rather be than right here on this Father's Day. No other place. I mean, we'll be with our family together after this service, but spiritual family is, gosh, I don't know how people do it without spiritual family. And we say that every time we do a funeral, and there's been a lot of them over the last couple of years. You say, I don't know how people do it without God, So thank you for being a spiritual family in this time. But yeah, I agree with Pastor Donnie, everything you're saying. It's easy to disconnect from dad, especially when he doesn't stand for what we think a biblical father should be. Right. And that also makes you critically think as a child, as offspring, with a father who is saved. If you're here with your dad, or your dad is saved, how blessed we are, despite the humanity, despite the irritations and annoyances sometimes, right? The fact is we have fathers who are speaking into our lives. The chapter and verse Ephesians 6:1-2. There's no stipulations to that. It's not obey and honor your parents if they're good, if he's a good guy, if he's a Christian, if he blesses you. It's honor him, obey him, And I'll take it one step further. If he's gone, I believe that principle still applies. Yeah. If your dad has left this earth, the principles of honoring and sowing and reaping, I believe, still apply, even though he may have physically left this earth.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And I like the story, the Proverbs that we read for, because if you go into that, we're talking about overlooking obstacles to receive all that a father has to impart to you, right? Which is one of the themes we're talking about. But if you look at who wrote Proverbs chapter 4, anybody know? King Solomon? Who was his pop? His father was David, right? And to speak to the side where a man knew God all his life, David was a man after God's own heart, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Right? A man's man, a spiritual man, a king of Israel, loved God, worshiper, and he actually he established the tabernacle of David where worship would happen before the Lord on Mount Zion, right by Zion, 24/7 every day. So he was a man of God. However, what about the humanity side of him? Right. What about the humanity side? What if Solomon didn't write this because of the humanity side? This is Solomon writing. I was a young guy, and my father imparted to me. And I'm telling you guys, you need to let the father impart to you. Well, David had a man named Uriah murdered so that he could steal his wife because he had sexual sin with her. Okay. And there's many other things that David did in his lifetime that was not so good. Right. So I think what we have to say here is, if we want to lock in and hold on to the fact that, yes, dads are less than perfect. Now, some may say, wait a minute, I'm in an abusive relationship. You don't know what I'm dealing with. Well, then you got to take a step back and you got to pray. You got to season that thing with prayer, and you got to get the wisdom of God on how to deal with that. Not just be led by the pain that it causes. Because listen, there's nothing like hanging in the pain with a instruction from heaven that at the end of the day, the pain's going to lift, not because you separate yourself, but the pain's going to lift because there's actually going to be a healing and restoration. There's no comparison there. So I'm saying to you, I do understand the pain. I've been through it. By the way, I'm going to be writing a book on my relationship with my father. So pray for me with that. When I've been going out and preaching, I've been preaching the relationship with my dad, full circle healing and restoration, and we've been seeing amazing things happen in churches. So I know the Lord wanted me to write a book years ago. So that's going to come out. What I'm saying is, don't quit too early. And even when your kids are running away, don't quit too early. Get a plan from God. Hey, isn't that what faith is all about? In the absence of what I need, in the absence of the thing I'm looking for, faith actually fills that hole. And faith will bring me to the next place.
Yeah, this is a crucial teaching, I believe, in America today, in the church, and probably taught on the least, of the topics. Just because we're living in the culture of needing to feel motivated and pumped up and encouraged when we go to church. And there's a place for all that. There's a place to feel motivated and, we get all that. We understand the type of world it is today. But the fact is, the teachings of father and sonship I believe, are crucial to success in life. Crucial. And I think organically, part of the lack of teaching on fathers and sonship today, I think, is due to the culture changing so much, and us just the world and mankind being so busy and distracted today that we just, got to make people feel good. I think part of it's that, but another part of it is we're living in a fatherless society. And between a quarter and a third of children are going to grow up without a father today. Now, those are hard facts. Those are not church, doctor the numbers to make it sound good in a church sermon. Those are hard facts, government statistics. Between a quarter and a third of kids won't even have a dad. And we haven't even gotten to the ones that do if they're rearing them and training them and speaking into their lives, like I was blessed enough to have for 32 years. But just take out a third, a quarter, just take them out right off the bat. No dad. Left to just figure it out themselves. So we have this fatherless culture today, this fatherless society, so we kind of organically don't really talk about it much because it's not there. But I challenge this house and anywhere else that I go, this is a teaching that is crucial to your development. Absolutely. You have many teachers, but one father, few fathers, right? It's okay to have voices. It's okay to have supplements, right? It's okay to have different people that speak into your lives, but you have got to know who your father is. And I'm just speaking spiritually for a moment. Of course, your heavenly Father, but it's dangerous business, especially today in Christianity. It's dangerous business to try to do this thing without your father. Yep. Really, really dangerous. And I see it all the time. I mean, I know young pastors from literally all over the country and talk to them often. And a lot of them don't have a spiritual father. A lot of them are good preachers. Yep. Great men of God, great teachers, but are still on the quest for, or even not maybe on the quest for a father. And I say, wow, it blows my mind, especially because of the foundation that I have. But I think it's dangerous business today because of the principles of sonship. To just try to do it, just do it because I'll do it is not healthy. It's not good. And I've said many times in this church before, don't fall into the trap today. And I'm not talking just to young people like teens or whatever. This is anybody, that feels the lack of a father in their lives. Don't be fooled today with the things that have replaced a father, right? Like, from the real spiritual examples right down to, going onto YouTube to check how to watch how to change a tire, instead of asking your dad 20 years ago. It's dangerous, the things in our culture today, in our society, that have replaced dad. Yeah, and I believe the church has got to pave the way. The church has to have different statistics than the world's. We're sadly, the church's statistics on divorce are the same outside of the church. We have to change that stuff. Sadly, the church's statistics on fatherlessness are the same as outside the church. The church must change that. And that doesn't happen by a giant organization. This isn't about a church organization coming together and having a conference on marriage or a conference on sonship. No, this comes by Christians all over the country and all over the globe saying, I'm going to put my flesh second. I'm going to put my earthly desires second and live a Spirit-led life. Because when you live a Spirit-led life, these things exude out of you. The fruit of the Spirit is a byproduct of living a Spirit-led life. Joy comes naturally. Peace comes naturally. Kindness and goodness and long-suffering. These things just are an organic byproduct of living a Spirit-led life. You don't have to grow these things. Tapping, I got to find this. I'm really bad at patience, so I got to find it. I'm not so good at kindness, so I got to go work on it. No, just understand it's the Spirit-led life, and these things just grow. They naturally grow. And the principles of sonship, I believe, are one of those things. I believe when you live a Spirit-led life, God sees fit to connect you with the Father, the spiritual Father that you need. First and foremost, our Heavenly Father, but secondly, our spiritual Father figure, and sonship starts to develop in your life. And I said this, at the Dad's memorial service, and I don't consider myself an expert in any area of the Bible, but sonship is one of the ones that I'm most skilled in, because there's not that much, believe it or not. Fathers and sons are a theme throughout the whole Word of God, Old Testament, New Testament, but really zeroing on the principles of father and son, there's not a whole lot specifically. There's a lot of things in between the lines that you have to read, stories, Old Testament stories, etc. But there's not a ton on it. And I have extensively studied fathers and sons because I believe in it. I bought in years ago. I bought into this principle of sonship, and I say not pridefully or sacrilegiously, I say it confidently because I understand the law of sowing and reaping. I have invested into sonship, and I'm expecting it one day from my kids and from spiritual children because I've sown into it. Just like a bank account, I've deposited into this. And I don't stop now just because my father has left the earth. I mean, I will be a son until the day I die. And I'm expecting that fruit because Jesus said we could have it.
That's just awesome. That's great. I don't know if you know the value of what's being shared with you today. It could be life-changing. It could actually cause your future to literally be changed and for the good. So I'm sitting here, and I really have been wrestling not to do this, but I feel the Lord wants me to tell a little bit. And in respect, my sister and my brother-in-law are here, and I want to just say this up front. I love my Father. My Father's in heaven. And what I'm going to share with you briefly is not the same man. He was delivered, okay? So there's no disrespect or dishonor to my dad. I just want to let you know that my dad gave me, because some of you are saying, wait a minute. Joe, you grew up with this awesome mom, awesome dad. They walked with God, Christian education. Like, come on now. They could be saying that. But I want you to understand something. I didn't grow up that way, okay? And we still have decisions to make. For instance, when I was 12 years old, I won't go into all the details, but my dad really gave me a beating. It was really bad. And it was just really bad. Use your imagination and go through. I'm not saying I got spanked, okay? I got a beating and was literally left unconscious, okay? So that's how bad it was. Maybe someday you'll read the book. But that scenario, when it happened to me, I said in my mind, I'm going to get him back. I'm going to hit the weights. Yep. I'm going to get huge and strong, and I'm going to get him back. I really wanted to take his life. That's where I was at mentally at 12 years of age. On the outside, smiling, the dimples were always there. Everyone, happy-go-lucky kid. But I can remember hanging with my friends, the football players, and having a few beers. And as soon as I had the few beers in me, all of us, you just freaked out when I said a few beers, right? I never had beers, kids, don't worry.
That was when you were a kid, not last week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I haven't had a beer in 40 years. But anyway, what was inside of me being pressed down started coming out when I'd have a few beers. And I can remember one story in particular. My good friend, Roger O'Grady, played defensive back. We were on the same team, and I was feeling good, and this anger that was inside started coming out because I was beaten, and I wanted to get my dad back, and I was not a Christian, okay? At this point, I probably was about 15 years of age, and I put my hands around his throat, and I started squeezing, and I was smiling at him while I was doing it, and I was squeezing hard, and I was a strong kid. I started squeezing harder, and I could see he's starting to gasp for air. So I'm just sharing that with you to say there was definitely a anger that was given to me. Biff's sitting here. He used to be afraid of my father. We grew up watching this, okay? So that's one story of one incident where I was abused, okay? And inside, I wanted to take him out. My dad gave me the opportunity to learn how to forgive, and he gave me the opportunity to learn how to live in forgiveness. I'm sharing this story with you because some of you here have been abused by a father figure. You've been left devastated and sometimes empty on the inside. But don't allow the enemy to jump on you and cause you to have a root of bitterness and anger and want to get back. What happened to me, thank God I knew Pastor Joe. He was Joey Arms at the time. And he came to check out me and Johnny Walters, which is Sister Debbie's younger brother, working out and training in the basement in Nutley. And he came over, long story short, and he shared Christ with us. And I was being lifted. So I went home that day, got on my knees, and accepted Christ. And I want to tell you, when I accepted Christ, instantly, that thing lifted off of me. And I forgave my father instantly. I changed. He didn't. Are you with me? I changed. Supernaturally, something changed. I don't know why at 15 years of age, 3 months later, I was 16, I got a revelation of walking in the love of God because I wanted to. Remember what I wanted to do? I wanted to take him out. And I was getting big and I was getting strong. Didn't have much dialogue with him for those years. Because for those years, the dialogue was him calling me an idiot, an imbecile, or cursing at me. That's what it was like in the younger days. At the end, in the later years, he would tell me things like, you're more of a man than I'll ever be. He would tell me things like, I love you. He kissed my son on the lips. Things that he never did. Like, God changed this man. Not just because of me, but because the thing that was on me that wanted to murder him turned into a thing that realized I forgive him, and I'm going to walk every day in forgiveness and pray and pray and pray and hear the mission and hear the direction of God. That man helped me understand forgiveness. So when people say to me, Sister Deb, you don't have any idea what my father did to me, they don't really know what my father did to me. That's just one snapshot. But you don't know all the details either. But I'm saying to you, even in the most difficult of situations, I'm not saying put yourself in harm's way. I'm not saying put your children in harm. That's not what I'm saying. But what is God saying to you? The murder lifted off of me, and the love of God filled me. Maybe, just maybe, if you're in that condition right now, I'm not putting a heavy weight on you. Press into God and let him cause you to understand forgiveness and be healed yourself to a whole nother level. And then maybe the mandate that you have will come out. Because the end of my story is right before Dad went home, he saw heaven and told us that story. I'm not saying that's going to be your end, but it certainly won't be your end if you bow out today. So stay with it.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, your story is, unfortunately, it doesn't always work out like that. That's for sure. But again, you understood as you got saved, you understood the principles of sonship while the abuse was happening. And you still tapped in, and look what the result yielded. Now, let me ask you this. Yeah. So I shared my heart a little, you shared your heart. Let's go a little off script now, as long as you're okay with that. Yeah. And that's actually important that you're okay with it, because I know you're going to kill me for this and embarrass you, but this is important because people are probably wondering what's happening. Pastor Donnie is now the senior pastor, and I submit to that, and it's the easy submission for me. From the little things like, are you okay with going off script, to right up to the important ministry decisions that we have to make. And that's exactly how my father would have wanted it. I'm a son. I'm a true son, and I'm not saying that arrogantly. I'm proud to say I'm a good son. But that being said, this man to my right here was more than a spiritual son. He was also like a biological son to my dad. So he's got a life of sonship that he's invested in, spiritually and biologically. And this is an easy transition for me to make. I know a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen now, whatever. Let me put your mind at ease, and don't feel like you have to, if I see people, talking on Facebook, what's going to happen. This man is right now, whether it's for a day, a year, or the next 20 years, he is stepping into a senior pastoral role like my dad was. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited to assist him and take this this ministry to a greater place. And I almost feel weird saying that, but that's exactly how Joe Arminio Sr. would have wanted it. He wanted his sons to surpass him. He wanted us to exceed him. And Pastor Donnie and I have talked about this with him so many times. And this will be a good segue, I think, into the dialogue that we should have. My dad wanted so badly to I don't want to say change, because my dad's up there with some of the worst profanity and curse words you could think of was the word compromise for my dad. He did not compromise anything, nothing. So he never was preparing himself to compromise anything. But I think just naturally he knew that the world is changing and there's some adaptions that I have to make. And he was in the process of really trying, but he would say to us often, you guys got to help me because I'm really bad in this area and you're really, you're better than me. And we were right smack in the middle of some transitions that we were making, And life has a way of throwing you some curveballs every once in a while. But he would tell, and it's funny because my dad was really good at calling you in the office and teaching you and explaining something to you that he was really working on in his life. And he would talk to us both about like pitchers in baseball that get older, right. And as you get older, you can't throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball anymore. So you have to change and adapt. That's the only way you can stay in the game. And he knew that, he knew that there was some changes and some shifts that he would have to make personality-wise, ministry-wise to be at the top of his game. And man, I'm so glad my dad went out at the top of his game. I mean, he went out like Derek Jeter, right? At the top, And so Malachi 4:6 says this. This is one of the, I told you last week, my last spiritual conversation with my dad was him encouraging me to lessons from a father, right? This is what today is all about, lessons from a father. His last lesson to me, and it was short, it was actually done at Yankee Stadium in cushioned seats, in the Ford suite seats, which was a Father's Day present from last year to him. And that was only a couple days before he left this earth and went home. And we had a few lessons that day, but one of the few, if not the only spiritual lesson, was he was encouraging me to listen to the right voice. Make sure you're discerning which voice is your own, the God's or Satan's. I told you all that. But a couple weeks earlier, we had a conversation, and this was a corporate conversation with several pastors. We were both there. And we talked about Malachi 4:6. And that says that, for those of you who don't know, Malachi was an Old Testament prophet. It's the last book in the Bible. This is actually the last verse in the Old Testament. I think there's is it 5 or 6? It's 6, yeah. This is the last verse. Is that right? It's the last verse in the Old Testament? Or is there a 7? I don't know. So, John goes, just move on. Yeah. So, look at this. And he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. This is crucial. Please. Fathers and sons, the principle of sonship, and the father turning the heart to the children is crucial. We can pray for revival, we can wail, we can worship, we can do it all. It will not click like it needs to click without the hearts of the father turning towards the children. And I've heard my dad quote the verse many times. But when we talked about this, you remember the day we were talking about this? It was almost like a light bulb went off in his head. Because here, let me put this into some layman's terms, and you're a product of this generation too, so maybe you can speak to it. I've kind of observed, not just in my own father's life, but generally speaking, that boomer generation, if you're born in the 50s, 60s, 70s, fathers have a general outlook, and overall speaking, kind of a frustrated opinion on this next generation, right? There's differences, there's irritations, there's annoyances, there's difference in dressing style, there's difference in music style, there's difference in business, there's difference in finances, there's difference in ministry, there's difference in family, right? And a lot of fathers of that generation kind of like don't get it. Maybe even look down on that. And because of that, we've detached from this generation, thus leading us to a third of kids growing up without a father, right? This isn't just, I mean, we have the proof of it. Yeah. We know that fathers have detached. And I think a lot of that is, yes, because of the degradation of society, but a lot of it, too, is dads from the old school, they can't wrap their head around a lot of, maybe their own sons, but we're talking spiritually now. We're talking broad in your mind for a second. In the church, right? Not so much abundant life, but the church of Jesus Christ. And although my dad was a great dad, and he loved pouring into younger people, he was a product of his generation. And like hundreds of pastors I know, kind of waiting for this next generation to like come up to the old school, like come up to where we are, like we're going to set the bar high, like we need to bring you up. And I think that's true. I think that's important because we can't compromise. You know, if there's a younger generation, spiritually speaking, that's messing around and watering down the gospel, I'm not saying we adapt to that. No, we bring them up and we get all that. But the hearts of the fathers turning towards the children, that's the exact opposite of an outlook of like, well, I'm going to sit here, and I'm not saying that dad did this. Again, I'm saying generally speaking, I'm going to sit here as a father and wait for all these children to get on my level. That's a prideful outlook. What Malachi is prophesying here is the fathers have to go and invest. The fathers have to take an approach of humility and lower themselves, lower tradition at times, lower pride at times, lower this wall of defense, and be willing to penetrate the hearts of the children. And this will, I believe, when we start to do this in the church, when we start to break down those walls and the fathers' hearts get turned towards the children, I believe that revival will explode. You know, we're trying it on all these different cylinders. You got the worship movement trying to get revival with their thing. You've got the teachers that are really, you know, the real theological minds, you know, and some of the greatest authors and theological minds that you can think of. They're trying to do it on their Christian, you know, radio program or show. And then you've got, you know, you got some houses of prayer, you know, all around the country that we're connected with that are awesome. I mean, 24-hour prayer around the clock, you know, some awesome ministries that are doing that. And that's good. That's really good. But what I believe will break really break the dam and cause a rush of the flow of God's Spirit, one of the key things I believe is when the fathers' hearts are turned towards the children, and we can break those walls down.
Fabulous. Fantastic. Prophetic. Yeah. True. That's the last anointing that's going to hit the church.
That's right.
Fathers to sons. So let me just talk 30 seconds for the way I was raised. So the way I was raised flowed into my Christianity at 16 years of age. So don't be offended, anybody, but this is going to be a little raw, but we'll talk about it. I was raised that if, you know, in Christianity, a young man, you know, if someone got a tattoo other than being in the armed forces, you were rebellious, you didn't want to work. Joe, am I right? You want to ride a Harley and that's about it. Like that's what we saw of tattoos. Right. Now your generation, a tattoo is almost like a form of art and an extension of clothing. Although I think you should be careful of that because when you're 75, some of the clothing you probably don't want on you. So anyway, that's another story for another day. So there's a lot of things that happen to guys my age and younger and your dad's age that kind of put us at bay, like look at you like, you're whacked, you're out of your mind. So you got tats, you got these big, what are those things called, gauges in your ears, you got piercings in your noses, and like, to us growing up, that was like, you do drugs. You do drugs. That's why you would do that to yourself. You do drugs. But we have Christian leaders doing that stuff, so obviously they're not doing drugs. So
that we know of.
That we know of. They might be. I don't know. So our obstacle, man, am I speaking right here at my age and around there? All right. And the fact that they kind of like mosey into work and there's no like time. what are you doing? Well, I got to express myself how I express yourself. I'll throw you off the building. What are you talking? We were raised, if you're supposed to be there at 9, you're there at 8:30. Andrew? Right? That's how we were raised. Time was very important. Sacrifice was very important. To us, our generation looks at the younger generation like everything's about entertainment. I have to spend at least 8 hours on Tuesday with my video games. Are you crazy? Like Grandpa didn't even get to go to high school and had to work 2 jobs so that we had food on the table. Your whole life revolves around entertainment. So these are the obstacles, Joe, that we deal with. And then there's one, too, the words that you guys use. Like, I'm going to say it. I'm not going to say the word. I'm going to spell it. The word S-U-C-K, to me, was one of the foulest words you could ever say. And I'm hanging with pastors, and they're going, yeah, that really blanked. And I'm like, oh! You just cursed. But to them, it doesn't mean what it meant to me. It means stinks. But this is how we're filtering all that, guys. So be patient with us. And the other thing about not recognizing us, not because we're egotistical and but we need you to connect with us so that we can download, and you basically ignore us. There's been many times that I had family meetings, and I said to my kids, I don't even think you like me. Because if I went by how you react to me, you don't even like me. And they're like, Dad, what are you talking?
Happy Father's Day.
Exactly. Happy Father's Day. Can I get a witness, men?
But some of these little things you're saying are some of them are big, but some of them are little.
Right.
I
want to say something.
Should I go get a big skull tattooed on my back today
Exactly.
after church? Okay, I just don't know if that's what you're recommending.
And I ride a Harley, so I got a little edge to me, you know what I'm saying? But I heard somebody say something. I cannot take credit for it. Deb, you were in the meeting with us. Dr. Hanby, Mark Hanby. We can have prayer meetings till the cows come home.
Yeah.
We can preach faith. We could do it all. But if the last anointing is fathers' attention and direction going to their children to cause this divine connection that's going to blow this earth into revival, it's not going to happen unless that happens. Right. Perfect visual. I'm a visual guy too. I needed this visual. Mark Canby, unbelievable understanding. He was a pastor of a church. He resigned the church, but right before he did, it was a church in Texas. I don't remember how big it was, but it was massive. I think it had like 10,000 people. So imagine the size of the sanctuary. He gets a call one day from the first responders calling him at home saying, you got to get down to the building right now. Why? Just get down here. He gets down there, and I forget the amount they told him. There was engineers there. There was thousands of tons of gallons of water that were on top of his building because he had a flat roof. And the weight, George, you'll probably know more about this being, architecture, engineering. The weight of water that was on the building was about to collapse the building. And there was nothing. They were like, what are we going to do about this? And so an engineer said the only way to do something, I don't know exactly how they rigged this up, was to be able to bring in downspouts that were massive and cut holes in the roof to get the water off the roof fast enough, this is a true story, by the way, not to crush the building. So they get this done, and it all happens. He's standing there. It's probably the wee hours of the morning, and as soon as they get these downspouts to the corners of the building and get it in place, they cut the opening, and what do you think happened? The water came right off the building. And he said he stood there in that parking lot in the middle of the night, and God said to him, did the downspouts work? And he said, yeah, God, they did. They worked. He said, no, they didn't. God said again, did the downspouts work? Yes, God, they did. It saved the building. And God said, no, they didn't. And he said, well, what do you mean, God? And God said, they didn't work at all. They functioned. And so the analogy that he got there was divine order. So if fathers are not going after sons to connect, regardless of the tattoos and regardless of the gauges in the ears, regardless of the SUCKs and all the other stuff that goes on, the ignoring like you don't even like us, hello? If we don't press in to get into their world to understand what makes them tick, then this whole thing's not going to work. But if we get in proper alignment The glory of God that's sitting up there in the heavenlies, that wants to bring revival, we're not going to have to work for it. We're not going to have to sweat for, buildings and sweat for finances and sweat for revival and try to hold people in our churches. Forget all that. Once we line up and the weight of the glory of heaven, the kabod of God wants to flow down through us, it can, because we're not out of joint. We are connected, fathers and sons, spiritual fathers and sons. So we're in proper alignment so that glorious last anointing, glorious last revival. We talk about the remnant, the remnant, the remnant. You can't have a remnant without the fathers and sons being together.
Right.
And now when that happens, get out of the way. You're not going to have to work. You're going to function. It's going to flow right through you.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen.
Some of those things are more important than others, right? But it's amazing how some of these little foxes have spoiled the principles of fathers and sons over the years. Some of these little things, But I have 4 small children, okay? I took a picture with them this morning in my driveway, and I'm just looking at it afterwards. I'm like, I'm just so humbled and blessed, to be able to say I'm a father. You don't as a dad, you don't.
Do your kids like you, though?
Now they do.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
But I don't know how many more years I'll have of that. But how often, as dads, a couple hundred dads stood up before, how often do you just take a moment and just go, not that often, because you're running around, you're doing things, you're breaking up fights, you're screaming at your kids, all this other stuff that takes your time, trying to put food on the table. These kids eat like,
Wait till they get bigger. They eat like adults.
Yeah, right. I'm going to send them over to your house to have as many meals as I can. But I'm looking at them, and I'm just thanking God, and I feel so blessed. But it would be ridiculous for me. Now, they range from age 0 to 6, right? So, they're not actually 0, but you know what I mean. They're 2 months to 6 years old, so they're little. But if I want my children to, one day relieve me of cutting the grass and mulching the beds and weeding, or help me at least, it would be ridiculous for me to sit in my chair in the living room and just wish it into existence. Do you understand what I'm saying? I would be hurting myself. I'd be hurting the goal. The ultimate goal is to get the stuff done, right? And I promise you, when they're old enough, I will not be pulling weeds anymore. I won't be cutting the grass. My kids will do that. Well, you have daughters. So what does that mean? Go get a pair of those rubber boots and, get out there, man. Like, they'll be on the tractor, right? But for me to sit in my designated seat in the living room and just hope it, because they've maybe watched, they've seen me do it, that's not enough. I have got to take them by the hand, and I've got to bring them to the tools, and I've got to demonstrate, and not just once. I've got to demonstrate time after time after time after time. This is how you do it. And then eventually, through a series of training, we can't, you understand what I'm saying now? It's paralleling it spiritually. We can't just be waiting for a new generation of men and women of God to just, boom, all of a sudden, no, it's going to take we've got to overcome. We've got to rebel against society today of fatherlessness. We've got to be rebellious against the culture today and strategically, intentionally father. And you're saying, well, that's good for you. You guys are pastors. What about me? This is a Jesus principle. This is not a pastoring principle. This is a life principle. Like, if you don't have any biological children, God has called you to be a father figure to somebody out there. I promise you, there's someone out there who needs a father figure that you can provide that to. If we would get outside of ourselves and understand that, we'd blow the roof off this thing. But we've got to take that posture and overcome some of these little things. And I don't think coming into work a half hour late, that's not a good thing. How do we balance? As fathers? Because, you're a little older than me. I believe part B is the hearts of the children back towards their fathers. This is not all on the fathers. Right. It's up to you guys. I think most of it is because fathers should know more, right? But part B is, and the children towards their fathers. So I think speaking on behalf of the next generation, we have to be mature enough to say, you know what? Just because they're different, just because their temperament may be a little bit shorter at times, maybe they're a little harder on me, I'm willing to look past that, okay? This is something really mature I'm saying as some of the younger up-and-comers in this room right now, and especially if you're in ministry, please listen to what we're saying. This is like good information today, and it's all organic too. This wasn't even rehearsed, none of it. Be mature enough to look past or look past at best. If you can't, at least go to the person in that role instead of letting offense come into your life and say, well, they're just, this is just an old man or an old woman who wants me. No, man, this is family. This is spiritual family. Go to them and express your hearts, next generation, or be mature enough to look past it and say, I'm going to look at their hearts, rather than some of the personality differences of someone 30 years my elder, right? That's what I think we can do as children turning their hearts. But what can fathers do in today's day and age? Like, where is the line between, okay, I can look past that, I could look past that gauge earring, but hey, I want my employees to show up to work on time. Yeah. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think two things. Thank you for sharing that with the younger guys as well. Because if my generation, honestly, if we just see that much, we're all in. Yeah. You give us just a little bit, we want to give you everything we got. So that's that point. As far as what you're saying is how do we deal with all this, I think it comes back to, and I keep saying this, and I don't want to sound redundant, but it's all relationship. Is the fact that I've seen kids that are late to work, that have tattoos, and use the word S-U-C-K, that are passionately pursuing Jesus, right? So I think we have to take a look at, are the things that are tripping us up doctrine? Are they doctrine, or are they cultural things that really bothered us in the era that we grew up in? I think we got to take a good, strong look at that, and not lower our convictions as far as relationship with God. Hey, if something's sin, it's sin. But if it's not sin, it's not sin. All right? And I think what I've tried to do, and maybe the worship thing has helped me, being the director of Joy Songs and always being involved with worship. I'm always being involved with younger people. I get involved with their lives. I love when they come over my house and we, spontaneously, because I have young kids in my house too, the friends come over that are the musicians and singers, whatever, and we have, I'll cook breakfast. Let's just have breakfast. Like, there's something that we're doing that's other than ministry or other than pointing out their flaw, but just trying to blow wind in their sails. If you can blow wind in the sails of a young person, and they know that even though, Pastor Joe, Pastor Donnie doesn't really understand me, but they believe in me, and they're going to blow wind in my sails, and if I crash against the rocks, they're still going to be there for me. They're not going to judge me and beat me over the head. If we could sow that into them, and if they are a half hour late, we sit down and talk about it and say, okay, you really need to be on time, but, is there reasons you can't be on time? And we talk about that. To me, and I told Joe this, to me, what's more important is not that you punch a clock, but that you actually are going to get the stuff done. Because being in ministry, you work 24/7 anyway. But you have to be accountable to make sure you get your stuff done and that we're progressing. Nothing drives my generation more crazy than if things are sloppy and on top of that, nothing's progressing. It's just like putting bamboo under our fingernails. It's horrific, right? So how do we do it? I think we need to build our relationship. I think it's incumbent on us. And Joe would probably say, no, it's incumbent on the young people. But it's incumbent on us to push forward, to develop relationships, to get into their world, do things they like to do, spend time with them where they like to spend time with it, listen to them, let them speak, and stop lecturing. And I think that'll build a relationship that they'll want to hear from us. I hope I'm right, but that's how I'm approaching it in these days.
Yeah, and Pastor Joe Sr. started to figure this out later on in life. I'm so glad that he started to reconnect and develop with the next generation. Not that he ever lost it, but I think being a senior pastor and a prophetic and apostolic voice, to a region for so many years, that was kind of something that he would say he got away from a little while. And towards one of Pastor Donnie's favorite stories of all time is my dad wants me to shovel the snow and I don't know how old I was a teenager, and he's, I'm using the snowblower, but he's literally, like, if this is me, he's here.
Wait, let me just set this up a little bit. We both like telling stories, but you got to hear this. So it was a snowstorm. The snow was like up to here.
Oh, it was big.
And Joe Jr.'s got the snowblower. We used to have to wrestle, Pastor Joe. Even me, I'm a grown man. I have to do it. You know, he had to operate the snowblower. I think he was afraid that we'd get sucked in and shriveled up and shot out the other side.
Which really,
it's impossible.
But which really, we were doing nothing.
Exactly.
Because then you'd go to shovel it because no, leave that. I got the snowblower.
Exactly.
So we were superfluous.
We're standing around
there.
watching him go like this. So it was at that point. Now Joe Jr. has the snowblower. I don't know how he got it. And I'm shoveling.
It was his
apron.
first ever time of passing the baton of
I'm
the snowblower.
shoveling the apron. Michael might even have been there, like freezing out in the rain somewhere. But
Right.
I'm shoveling the apron. Joe Jr.'s got it, and I'm watching from about here to where Vern is. I'm watching this, and Joe's got the snowblower, and he's trying to be perfect because if you moved either way, he was getting. And Pastor Joe was doing this the whole time, and I could see him going. So fill in the blanks. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. I'm snowballing. He's behind. He's so close. I can feel the nylon of his pants rubbing against mine, and he's going. No, you got to do this. I mean, it's not that complicated of a process, but he wants me to do it his way, and he's yelling that, and I'm like maybe going off course a little bit, and I'm saying, Dad, I could do it. No, Joseph, do it my way.
Right. Joseph, do it my way.
And
at one point, I threw my shovel in the air, and I threw my body into the deep snow on my back, cracking up, because it was just like, I wish I videoed this.
But that represents, at that moment, that was 20 years ago of his life, I think he was a product of that generation of like, we got to just, you guys, you all have to see it this way. And then he started to recognize over the years in the practical things, like, and it got to the point one day where he wouldn't even come out of his house anymore, just take care of the snow. But spiritually, he started adapting too. Like, wow, like, it's not just this generation has to be a carbon copy of our generation. There's different methods. There's different styles. We got to empower them. One of his favorite things to do, up until he took his last breath, was our every other month meeting with 10 or 12 of the young leaders in this church that hopefully will continue to be on the path they're on and go towards the call of God on your lives. But that was one of his favorite things to do, to sit in that setting with 10 or 12, 20-something-year-olds. And inside, there's probably part of him that's like, I don't really understand everything they do. I don't understand their outfits here, their hairstyles, whatever. But there was a desire for him, and we're in some of those meetings too, a desire to pour in, a desire to pass on. This is like, guys, this is what God has shown me over the last 40 years. I want to deposit that into you.